The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I was used to the hum of my own thoughts, the soft whir of appliances, the occasional knock on my door from my well-meaning, but slightly overbearing, alien neighbor, Zuklar. Zuklar, a 7-foot-tall being from a species with skin like shimmering emerald scales, had a strange habit of stopping by for social interactions. These usually involved me being roped into his latest cultural curiosity, whether I liked it or not. But today, things were different. Zuklar had been acting a little strange. It was the start of his species' mating season, something I had been warned about when I first moved in next door. Apparently, mating season was a big deal for Zuklar's species. They had elaborate rituals, intense customs, and weird, complex body language that I had no intention of understanding. I had politely kept my distance. After all, I didn't need any of that drama in my life. But when I heard a knock on my door that evening, I already knew who it was. "Hey, Zuklar!" I greeted him, trying to sound casual as I opened the door. His eyes sparkled, though there was something more intense than usual in his gaze. "Human neighbor!" he boomed, his voice deep, almost booming in the hallway. "Tonight is the night of the great ritual. You must come, be a part of it." I raised an eyebrow. Nah, I'm good, man. Thanks, but I'll pass." Zuklar leaned in closer, his face only inches from mine. "But it is the most important night. The mating season ritual. You will be honored." I wasn't sure if I was more freaked out by the idea of being honored, or by the fact that his breath smelled like a mixture of some alien fruit and burnt metal. Either way, I wasn't interested. "Look, man, I'm not really into all that mating stuff," I said, backing up slightly. "I'll just—" Before I could finish, I felt a sudden, electric-like zap pulse through my body. It was as if someone had hit a switch in my brain. Everything went blurry for a moment, my senses scrambling, and then, nothing. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the fog in my head, but something felt off. Like a dream that wasn't quite my own. I looked down, expecting to see my regular human hands. But instead, I was staring at massive green claws. I froze, my heart racing. "What the hell?" I tried to speak, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was a deep, alien rumble. Why do I sound like you?" I asked in disbelief, my voice too powerful, too alien. I glanced up and found myself staring at Zuklar, only I wasn't staring at him from my usual height. No, I was towering over him now, towering over everything in sight. My human body had been swapped with Zuklar's gigantic alien one. It was like a nightmare, but also kinda cool. I had never been this tall before. Zuklar, meanwhile, seemed equally baffled. He was looking down at his own body, his human-sized arms, and his confused expression. What has happened?" he asked, his voice higher-pitched than I'd ever heard it. It was honestly kind of hilarious. "Don't ask me, man!" I shouted back in my alien body, trying to keep it together. "This wasn't part of the plan." We both stood there for what felt like ages, staring at each other, unable to comprehend the bizarre situation we had found ourselves in. The room seemed to grow smaller, the space around us feeling cramped as we adjusted to our new, swapped bodies. My head was racing, thoughts colliding in every direction. How the hell were we going to fix this? What the hell had happened? Zuklar seemed to recover first. He straightened up in his new human body, shaking off the confusion. "This is most unexpected," he muttered. "Yeah, no kidding," I snapped back. "This is insane." I looked down at my alien form again. My new body felt heavy, like I was dragging around a ton of metal with every step. Every time I moved, my muscles seemed to stretch and flex in ways I wasn't used to. The alien skin was slick beneath my fingertips, and I could feel a strange energy pulsing through my veins. The worst part? I had no idea what to do next. Zuklar's species communicated through an entirely different set of gestures and body language. I was going to have to figure out how to deal with all this, fast. Zuklar, in the meantime, looked absolutely ridiculous in my human body. His green skin was replaced by my pale, somewhat awkwardly shaped skin, and he seemed incredibly out of place, trying to adjust his human arms. He tried to stand upright but kept wobbling, as if the muscles didn't quite work the way they should. He gave me a confused look. How do humans stand like this? I couldn't help but laugh. Well, you don't wobble around like a newborn calf, for starters. Zuklar's face creased in what I assumed was confusion. Explain, he demanded, but the human voice coming from his mouth made everything sound more comical. You've got 2 legs, dude, just put your weight on them, like this, I said, taking a few awkward steps forward. Zuklar tried to mimic me, but of course, his long alien legs didn't quite cooperate. It was like watching a giant toddler trying to walk for the first time. He fell over, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Maybe this is what I get for not attending your mating season rituals, I said, trying to catch my breath. Zuklar groaned from the floor, looking completely helpless in my body. I demand to know how this happened, human. I sighed. I don't know, man. I was minding my own business, and you zapped me with whatever that was. I think we're stuck like this for a while. He grumbled under his breath. This is most inconvenient, he muttered. I couldn't help but agree. Neither of us knew how to fix this mess. But one thing was for sure, this was just the beginning of our chaos-filled night. The first few moments in my new alien body were a mess. Every time I tried to move, my limbs felt like they had a mind of their own. It was like wearing a suit that was 10 sizes too big, except the suit was made of muscles, scales, and some kind of internal organs I couldn't even begin to understand. I looked down at my massive green claws and sighed in frustration. This was going to be a nightmare. All right, I muttered to myself, trying to steady my breathing. Focus. Just move like Zuklar. How hard could that be? But the first step I took forward felt like I was lifting a car. My legs were long, powerful, but awkward. Every movement felt unnatural, and I nearly stumbled over my own feet. I had to stop myself from falling on my face, which wouldn't have been the most dignified way to kick off this body swap fiasco. I glanced over at Zuklar, still in my human body, trying to figure out what he was doing. The sight of him in my body was both hilarious and slightly terrifying. He had that same confused look on his face, but now he was holding up his arms, inspecting them like they were some alien contraption he was trying to get the hang of. He wiggled his fingers, poking at the air like he was trying to communicate with invisible creatures. Okay, what now? I asked, trying to steady myself as I looked down at my new alien form again. Zuklar tried to stand up straight in my human body, but he couldn't quite get it right. His shoulders hunched awkwardly, his alien eyes too wide in the small human face. He looked like a giant toddler who had been stuffed into a human body and told to act normal. How do I balance? He asked, a panicked edge creeping into his voice. I groaned. It's easy, just stand on your 2 feet, and don't do whatever you're doing now. You look like you're about to topple over and crush someone. Zuklar was trying his best, but he still hadn't figured out the concept of walking. He stumbled again and almost knocked over my coffee table, his limbs flailing in every direction. I facepalmed in frustration. This wasn't just embarrassing for him, it was embarrassing for me. This was my body? I never realized how much coordination and balance it took just to walk normally. Okay, let's take this slow, I said, my voice grating in my new deep, rumbling tone. I tried again to move, but the alien body didn't cooperate. Every step was a lurch, a struggle. My legs were so long, and I kept tripping over myself. There was no way I could move like Zuklar did. He glided around effortlessly. Me? I was like a giant, clumsy sloth trying to navigate a world designed for humans. How did you do this so easily? I muttered under my breath, struggling to keep my balance. Zuklar, still in my human body, was now trying to replicate my movements. He mimicked me awkwardly, but it was clear he had no idea what he was doing. His tiny human hands, compared to his usual powerful alien claws, made every task seem even more ridiculous. Do you want me to help you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't need to add insult to injury at this point. He looked at me with wide eyes, his human face clearly frustrated. Yes. I cannot seem to control these limbs. I sighed, looking down at my oversized alien arms. The claws were huge, far bigger than my old hands. I wondered how the hell I was supposed to do anything useful in this body. I couldn't grab a coffee mug without shattering it into pieces. All right, let's try something simpler, I said, attempting to guide him through the steps. You have to balance your weight, shift it from one leg to the other. Just try standing still first. Zuklar focused, and this time, he at least managed to stand without falling over. But as soon as he tried to move his legs, he looked like he was trying to break into some alien jig that had nothing to do with walking. Every time he moved, he lost his balance again, but he kept getting back up, more determined than before. It was honestly starting to look like a bad alien dance-off. Just move like a human, I groaned. Not like a T-Rex trying to take a walk on ice. Zuklar paused, looked at me with a frown, and for a second, I thought he was going to say something profound. Instead, he mimicked the way I stood. His back straightened, his legs stiffened, and suddenly, he didn't look half bad. His small human arms looked comically out of place on his massive body, but at least now he wasn't stumbling everywhere. Yes! I did it! Zuklar shouted with victory in his human voice. Yeah, you did, I said, exhaling in relief. But now try walking. Zuklar took a few unsteady steps, each one more awkward than the last. He raised his feet way too high, then slammed them down like he was marching in a parade. I watched, half in awe and half in horror, as he bumped into my furniture and knocked over a lamp with his giant alien hands. Careful! I called out, but I couldn't stop myself from laughing. The sight of Zuklar, clumsily trying to figure out how to walk in my body, was too ridiculous. You're not exactly making a great first impression, buddy. Zuklar grinned, his human teeth flashing. It is much more difficult than it seems, he admitted, his voice full of mock seriousness. Yeah, no kidding, I muttered. Now imagine having to live like this for an entire day. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Zuklar gave me a knowing look. Oh, I am quite certain I will master this soon. I didn't know if I should be terrified or impressed. As funny as it was watching Zuklar try to adapt to human life, it was even more bizarre being in his body, trying to make sense of his alien ways. There was no guidebook for this. Every time I tried to move, the alien muscles didn't want to cooperate. I had no idea how to control this much power. All right, I think you need to figure out how to blend in with the humans next, I said, taking a few awkward steps forward. And I need to figure out how to keep you from making a mess of my life. Zuklar's eyes narrowed playfully. Do not worry, human, he said in my voice. I am the master of adapting. I had no doubt he was anything but that. But then again, neither was I. We were both stuck in this absurd situation, and if we didn't figure out how to fix it, the night was only going to get crazier. I couldn't believe this was happening. There I was, in Zuklar's massive alien body, feeling like a circus freak in a world where I didn't belong. Every move I made felt like a giant misstep, like I was walking in a suit too big for me and just waiting to trip over myself. The alien muscles flexed in ways I couldn't control, and it was like trying to juggle bricks. Everything felt wrong. I wasn't sure where to start, but there was no time to waste. Zuklar had already adapted to being in my human body, so now it was my turn to figure out how to navigate his body. I glanced around the room, trying to get a sense of what I was supposed to do. This wasn't just about walking, there was a whole other set of expectations to contend with. Zuklar's species communicated through body language that was entirely foreign to me, and in this body, it felt like I was carrying an alien passport into a world of strange customs. I had no idea where to begin. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was not ready for whatever mating season ritual he had in mind. I needed to get this right, or I'd be stuck in this awkward situation longer than I wanted. Okay, time to focus, I muttered under my breath, trying to keep my cool. I straightened my back, stretching the alien muscles as much as I could. Zuklar's body was built for strength, each step was heavy, each movement deliberate, but it was all so foreign. The weight of my new body felt like carrying a mountain. I tried to take a few steps forward, but my legs were too long, and I ended up stumbling into a chair. Great, just great, I muttered, pulling myself up. I needed to stop thinking about it and just do it. That's what Zuklar would do. He was always confident, always moving with ease, like he had the world figured out. If I was going to survive this, I had to mimic him. But I wasn't Zuklar, and no amount of trying was going to make me him. Still, I had no choice. I stretched my arms out, trying to get a feel for the alien muscle. The claws, *Jesus*, the claws were a whole new level of awkward. They weren't like human hands. They were long, sharp, and tough. Every time I tried to move them, it felt like I was going to rip something apart. I raised my arm cautiously, trying to mimic what I'd seen Zuklar do earlier, but the effort was less than graceful. I caught my own reflection in the mirror. The sight of a huge, green-scaled alien was enough to make me lose focus, and I had to shake my head to regain my composure. I couldn't afford to let myself freak out. Okay, I said to myself, trying to sound confident. You've got this. Just do it like Zuklar. I started moving again, this time more deliberately. I took a few steps, each one more controlled than the last. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. My alien body responded a bit more fluidly now, but it still felt like a heavy weight dragging me down. That's when it hit me. I was supposed to do something with my body. Zuklar had this whole set of ritualistic gestures that communicated. I wasn't entirely sure what. But I needed to figure it out fast. The longer I waited, the harder it would be to blend in with the alien crowd. I turned back to Zuklar, who was still trying to adapt to my body. He seemed to have finally figured out how to move in a human form without constantly stumbling. It was like watching someone in a rented suit who didn't quite know how to wear it. But at least he was functional. All right, I called out, my voice deep and rumbling in my chest. Now you just need to act normal. No more weirdness. Zuklar looked up from where he was inspecting his human hands and gave me a look. Normal? He repeated, raising an eyebrow. What is normal? I sighed. Just act like I would act. Walk like I walk. I don't know, you've seen me do it. Just blend in, okay? Zuklar nodded, a confident expression on his human face. But instead of walking, he stood completely still for a moment. What is this blending in? I stared at him, face palming. It's not rocket science, man. Just, look, walk around, talk to people the way humans do. You're making this way harder than it needs to be. He paused again, clearly deep in thought, before shrugging. I will try, he said, sounding more like my human self than the Zuklar I knew. Zuklar tried to take a step forward, but then his hand shot out toward the couch, like he was going to use it for support. Instead, he flung it backward in a way that could only be described as alien. He overcompensated, and before I could stop him, he bumped into a table, knocking everything on it to the floor. My face turned red with embarrassment. You're doing it wrong! I yelled. God, what are you doing? Zuklar blinked, looking unfazed. I was merely adjusting myself. You're not adjusting. You're wrecking everything in sight. Zuklar turned back to face me, clearly not understanding why I was getting so upset. I think you should adjust your perspective, he said. This body, your body, it is different. I am not used to it. I threw my hands up in exasperation. I know! But you can't just go around destroying stuff every time you get confused. He cocked his head to the side. I do not see the issue. You seem capable of handling this body with ease. Why can't I do the same? I clenched my jaw. Because I'm not a 7-foot-tall alien with claws that could tear through steel. This is ridiculous. Zuklar's expression softened. Ah, yes. I suppose that is true. I am not used to such fragile surroundings. Just please, I said, rubbing my temples. Try not to break everything. I needed a break, but there was no time. I had to learn how to survive in this alien body before I made an even bigger mess. But I wasn't even sure how to start. My hands were too big. My steps were too heavy. Everything was awkward and out of place. I turned to face the mirror again, examining myself in Zuklar's body. I didn't even look like me anymore. I was a complete stranger in this alien form. My chest tightened. How could I possibly handle the mating rituals that were part of the deal? I had no idea what I was doing. The alien customs felt like a whole new language, one that I didn't understand, and I wasn't sure how to learn it fast enough to get out of this nightmare. But then I remembered Zuklar's confidence. Maybe if I just faked it, if I acted like I knew what I was doing, I could get through it. It wasn't ideal, but it was my best shot. All right, I muttered, taking a deep breath. Let's give this a shot. And so, I tried again, every step heavier than the last, every gesture more awkward, but with one goal in mind, to make it through the night without completely embarrassing myself, or destroying anything else. I had to admit, Zuklar was starting to get the hang of human movements, but that didn't mean I was. In fact, every moment I spent in his massive alien body felt more like a disaster waiting to happen. My every step felt clumsy, and every attempt at mimicking his cultural behavior seemed to land me in deeper trouble. As if the body swap wasn't complicated enough, Zuklar had taken to his new human form with what seemed like absolute gusto. He was now sitting on the couch, trying to engage with my neighbors, who had knocked on my door to see if I was okay. They had known something was off because they'd seen Zuklar, a 7-foot alien, hanging out around my apartment complex. What they hadn't expected was to find him now in my human body, smiling awkwardly, trying to make sense of how to act human. It was even worse than I had imagined. Zuklar was laughing, no, guffawing, at my neighbor's jokes, but his laughter was so offbeat and exaggerated that it made everything worse. They were staring at him like they had just seen a ghost, their faces tight with confusion. So, who exactly are you? Karen, the neighbor who always popped by for casual chit-chat, asked with a forced smile. She was clearly uncomfortable, trying to make sense of the weirdness that was unfolding before her eyes. Zuklar, in my body, sat up straighter, his human face beaming with that odd, alien look of delight. I am Greg, your friendly, normal neighbor. Yes. Greg. He said this with such force that I almost thought he'd start repeating the word to prove it. Greg? Karen blinked, her eyebrows raised skeptically. Since when do you go by Greg? I could already see where this was going. Zuklar, in my body, didn't even remotely understand the concept of subtlety. Every move, every gesture he made was so exaggerated that I could hear the awkwardness of the situation spreading through the room like a bad smell. No. I am Greg from Earth. Zuklar tried again, his tone a little more urgent as if Karen was supposed to get it. You know, human Greg. The guy who lives here? The human? Karen was still unconvinced. Okay, I think I need a drink, she muttered, clearly perplexed. But before she could make her exit, Zuklar stood up abruptly, stretching his human limbs to their fullest extent, his movements looking stiff and mechanical. I am very good at human customs, he announced loudly. Let us engage in the social exchange. What do humans do for bonding? Dancing, I think? And before Karen could even respond, he started awkwardly hopping around in place, his human body shaking in ways that looked nothing like anything I'd ever seen a human do. I felt my face turning red in my alien body as I watched the train wreck unfold in front of me. He was trying to dance, but he was moving like a drunk giraffe, overly animated, with too much enthusiasm and none of the rhythm. Karen was staring in absolute silence now, her lips slightly parted. Greg, I think maybe you should sit down? Zuklar didn't listen. Instead, he pulled my neighbor, who was now visibly confused, into what could only be described as an uncomfortable, slow-motion version of some alien mating dance. This is human bonding. This is tradition, he declared, totally oblivious to the look of sheer terror on Karen's face. Do you not like my human moves? I am a very flexible human. I couldn't watch this anymore. My human body, my own body, was now the center of an alien free show. Zuklar, stop! I yelled, but I knew it was futile. The words just came out of my alien throat in a booming, deep voice, and they went completely unheard. Zuklar continued his bizarre, chaotic dance, somehow twisting his body in ways that looked entirely unnatural. He grabbed Karen's hand, pulling her into an awkward twirl, completely disregarding the confused look in her eyes. Okay, really not what I expected, Karen muttered, her voice dripping with disbelief. I think I'm gonna go, maybe get some air. I couldn't blame her. If I were in her shoes, I'd be doing the same thing. The worst part was that Zuklar, now in my human body, thought this was normal. He was genuinely convinced that this was what humans did when they wanted to make friends or show affection. His alien brain didn't have the right context for any of it. I tried to move toward him in my alien body, but every step I took felt like it was in slow motion. I was fighting the urge to just grab him and shake him, but I had no idea how to do that in this alien form without looking even weirder. The alien body had too much power. I wasn't used to this level of strength and coordination, especially when everything seemed out of sync with what I knew about human behavior. Finally, I managed to get close enough to Zuklar and Karen to intervene. Zuklar! I shouted, trying to grab his attention, but again, my voice was so deep and booming that it sent a small shockwave through the room. This isn't how humans interact. You're scaring her. Zuklar paused mid-spin and turned toward me, his face full of confusion. But this is how humans bond, yes? No! I almost screamed. You're ugh! Forget it. Just stop moving. Sit down. Zuklar didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, still holding Karen's hand, his face completely perplexed, as if he had never encountered a social interaction so complicated. Slowly, he let go of her hand and sat back down on the couch, slumping with what looked like resignation. Karen, still standing there awkwardly, sighed and gave me one last look before retreating to her own apartment. I'll just pretend none of this happened, she muttered. As soon as she was gone, I turned to Zuklar and tried to keep my cool. What the hell was that? You can't just grab people and dance around with them. Zuklar tilted his head. But it felt right. I thought humans enjoyed this. You never told me how to act like a human. My alien brain could barely comprehend what I was hearing. Look, I don't know what you were trying to do, but that was way off. We have to figure out how to blend in, not act like whatever that was. Zuklar seemed to get it. Or at least, I hoped he did. But one thing was clear, this body swap was proving to be far more complicated and dangerous than I had ever imagined. And worse, I was starting to fear that if we didn't fix this soon, it might not just be my social life on the line, it could be my entire existence. I was starting to realize that things were spiraling out of control, and Zuklar and I were only making it worse. It wasn't just the physical missteps or the absurd attempts to fit into each other's roles, it was everything. Every move I made felt like a catastrophe waiting to happen. I was supposed to figure out how to behave in his body, how to blend in with his species, but the more I tried, the more confused I became. And Zuklar, now fully aware of how little I knew about his species' customs, was getting way too comfortable in my human body, testing every limit and crossing every line in the most uncomfortable ways possible. We need to fix this, I muttered, pacing around my apartment, trying to ignore the alien muscles that kept moving in ways I couldn't control. We can't just keep going like this. I'm this close to causing an intergalactic incident. Zuklar, sitting on my couch and looking oddly relaxed in my body, gave me a sideways glance. He had somehow figured out how to sit properly without crashing anything, an improvement, I guess. His feet were flat on the ground, and his human hands rested on his knees, but there was no denying the fact that he had a better handle on my body than I did on his. I looked like a giant mess of alien limbs trying to function. You speak as though you know how to fix it, Zuklar said, sounding genuinely curious. What exactly are we supposed to do? I paused. That was the million-dollar question. The body swap had come from nowhere, and we had no clue how to reverse it. I didn't even know how it happened in the first place. One moment, I was trying to avoid Zuklar's mating season drama, and the next, we were in each other's bodies. There was no manual for this. I don't know, all right? I said, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. But I need to figure out how to get back to my body before we both do something that makes things worse. Zuklar tilted his head, his human face filled with confusion. Why must we fix this? I like this body. It feels powerful. I rubbed my temples. It's not about power, Zuklar. It's about... I froze, a thought hitting me like a ton of bricks. Wait, power. Zuklar blinked, clearly not following. Yes, power. You have more strength, more muscle. Your form is magnificent. I turned to face him, my mind racing. This was it. We weren't just stuck in each other's bodies. We were also dealing with the fact that Zuklar's species had a vastly different perception of strength and power. His species communicated with physical dominance and displays of energy, something that I had completely overlooked until now. Wait, I said slowly. What if this isn't a simple body swap? What if we're both experiencing what each other's species perceives as strength? Zuklar furrowed his brow. I do not understand. I'm saying, I said, trying to make the connection clearer. Maybe what we think of as strength is completely different. You're used to powerful gestures, and in my body I'm trying to manage your massive form, but I'm not understanding it fully. You're seeing human customs as weak because we don't rely on physical displays the way your species does. Zuklar leaned back, seeming to consider this. Ah, yes. You are right. But how does that help us fix the situation? I paced again, feeling my alien limbs struggle to keep up with my thoughts. Maybe the solution is a simple one. We need to reverse the body swap by performing a ritual that requires us to understand each other's species on a deeper level. We need to communicate, not physically, but through our understanding of one another's customs. Zuklar's eyes narrowed. But how can we understand if we do not perform the correct gestures? I had a feeling he was onto something. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a cultural misunderstanding, but also something we could fix. Together star. The rituals, the movements, the very way we interacted, it wasn't just about copying each other. It was about interpreting each other's essence. Maybe we just have to stop trying to mimic each other, I said, stopping in my tracks. Maybe we need to meet in the middle. We need to learn what the other's body is capable of without forcing it into the wrong context. Like when you tried to dance, or when I couldn't even walk properly in your body. We were both fighting against our natural instincts. Zuklar seemed to process this for a moment. I understand. But how do we proceed? How do we switch back? I took a deep breath, staring at my alien body, his body, standing in front of me. I felt the weight of it once more, the power, the strength that was all alien to me. But if we were going to fix this, it had to be a joint effort. We performed the ritual, I said with more certainty than I felt. But not the way you've been doing it. We do it the right way. The way that respects both of our species, not just your alien rituals or my human ones. We need to recognize that strength comes in different forms, Zuklar. Maybe it's not about muscle or power. Maybe it's about understanding where the other comes from. Zuklar nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding in his alien eyes. I think I understand. It will not be easy, but perhaps we can find a balance. The words felt like a breakthrough. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We couldn't just go back to our normal lives until we understood each other, not just in body, but in spirit. I needed to stop fighting Zuklar's alien form, and he needed to stop thinking my human body was weak. Only then could we fix this ridiculous body swap. You're right, I said, taking a deep breath. We can't fix this until we stop fighting each other. If we're going to make it through this, we have to make peace with the bodies we're in. Zuklar gave a small grin. Agreed, human. It wasn't the most perfect solution, but it was the only one we had. Now, we had to try to undo everything we'd done wrong. And that meant embracing the body we had, learning to see the strength in it, and figuring out how to make our way back to who we truly were. It was the only way to fix this without doing any more damage. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a glimmer of hope. It felt like the walls were closing in. Everything I had hoped would somehow work itself out was now a tangled mess of confusion, physical mishaps, and the kind of absurdity that could only come from a body swap with an alien. The situation had escalated quickly, and it seemed like there was no easy way out. Every time I thought we were getting closer to a solution, things spiraled even further. But now, with Zuklar and me finally beginning to understand each other's bodies and cultures, there was a sliver of hope. It was time to act. I stood up straight, feeling the unfamiliar strength of Zuklar's body course through me. I had grown accustomed to the power, even if it was still uncomfortable at times. My alien muscles were still a mystery to me, but I had come to accept them as my temporary reality. Zuklar, still in my human body, was adjusting too, albeit in his own way. His confidence had grown, and though his actions were still clumsy at times, I could see that he was finally starting to get the hang of it. "All right," I said, looking down at him. "We can't keep avoiding this. We need to complete the ritual properly, or we're stuck like this." Zuklar nodded solemnly. "I understand now. It is about respect. We must respect each other's forms and ways. I was too focused on my own customs." It was the first time he had admitted that he might have been wrong. It felt like a breakthrough. Now I just needed to figure out how to get us back to our original bodies. "We're going to do this together," I said, my voice firm. "You need to stop thinking that human customs are weak, and I need to stop pretending I can handle everything in your body without causing a disaster. We need balance." Zuklar, still in my body, looked down at himself. "I am ready. But how do we proceed?" I took a deep breath. "We need to stop focusing on the differences between our species and just focus on the shared understanding we both have. We both have strength, just in different ways. You have physical strength, and I have adaptability. You can't be a human in my body, and I can't be an alien in yours. But together, maybe we can bridge the gap." Zuklar tilted his head, thinking it over. "So we are not bound by our bodies, but by our actions." "Exactly," I said. "We need to perform a gesture of respect, not one that's based on physical power, but one that acknowledges both our cultures and the fact that we are trying to understand each other. It's not just about the ritual, it's about the connection we form while we do it." Zuklar seemed to get it. "I will follow your lead. Let us begin." We stood together, our bodies aligned but still unfamiliar. My alien form towered over him, my movements strong but awkward. His human body seemed fragile in comparison, yet I could see that he was holding his own in ways that I hadn't expected. We didn't need to mimic each other anymore. We needed to create our own space, our own understanding. I reached out, offering him a gesture of peace. It wasn't a traditional gesture from either of our species, but it was a step toward acknowledging each other's strength. I waited, watching his eyes, waiting for his reaction. Zuklar studied my hand for a moment before reaching out with his own, human hand. It was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters. But then, as he took my hand, I felt something shift between us. It wasn't an overwhelming feeling, but it was enough to make me believe we were getting somewhere. "We are not so different," Zuklar said softly, his voice genuine. "I see that now. Strength is not always seen, but felt." I nodded. "Exactly. Now we just need to figure out how to reverse the swap." Zuklar looked at me seriously, his human face full of resolve. "We must complete the ritual together. This will end it. We will finish it, and everything will return to normal." I didn't know if that was true, but I had to trust him. If there was any way out of this, it was through mutual understanding. We didn't need to fight each other's bodies anymore. We had to acknowledge that our differences weren't obstacles, they were opportunities for growth. We moved together, in sync for the first time since the swap. The ritual was simple, but it wasn't about the steps or the motions, it was about the connection between us. As I followed Zuklar's lead, I realized that we weren't just performing some alien mating dance or trying to mimic human interactions. We were both putting aside our misconceptions, our misunderstandings, and allowing ourselves to trust each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I could feel the shift happening as we completed the last part of the ritual. The power that had been building inside me, the strange, alien power, began to dissipate. It wasn't a dramatic change, but I could feel myself returning to my human body. The heavy weight of the alien form was lifting, and I could sense the familiar feeling of my own muscles. My human body. Zuklar, too, seemed to be going through the same process. The shift was subtle, but it was there. We didn't need to say anything. The connection we had built through the ritual had done its work. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him not just as an alien, but as a being with the same needs, the same desires, the same drive for connection. And then, just as quietly as it had begun, the swap was over. I was back in my own body. Zuklar, too, had returned to his alien form. The change was gradual, but unmistakable. We were ourselves again. But something had changed. We weren't the same people we had been when the body swap started. There was a deeper understanding between us now. We didn't have to speak the same language, or follow the same rituals, or even look the same to understand each other. I looked at Zuklar and smiled. We did it. He nodded, his eyes softer than they had been before. Yes. We understand now. And for the first time since the whole mess began, I felt at peace. Not just with Zuklar, but with myself. We had come a long way from the clumsy, awkward bodies we had been forced into. But more importantly, we had come to an understanding that was worth more than any simple solution. We weren't just humans and aliens anymore. We were something more. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.